day to protest were born of political opportunism. They were nurtured by some of the most base, vile and xenophobic sentiments of which the country is possible. They exist today in international infamy, and they will be remembered only with utter shame. But today we will stand with the vulnerable and the defenceless against the bullies of the government and the opposition. There are so many big things wrong with these policies, it's hard to know where to begin. As far as I know, we are the only country in the world both to manufacture cruelty deliberately towards these asylum seekers and then to outsource it to poor third world countries.
The height of hypocrisy that we could be involved militarily in the Middle East and then suddenly close our borders.
In the lead up to the invasion of Iraq in 2003, I asked the question, is an Iraqi life of any less value than an Australian life, a British life or an American life? Today I further ask, what value do we Australians place on the lives of some of the most vulnerable people in our world today? How do we view the 45 million people worldwide who are displaced? Do we understand what it is like to be living in fear for our lives, to be persecuted, or to be deprived of the very basic necessities of life?
We've taken now a generation of people who are already traumatised by their experiences in their own countries. We've taken people who've seen far too much of armed guards and barbed wire, and we guard them behind barbed wire, and we traumatise them further.
So innocent people are being made an example of in order to send a message, which is to say there is no hope. We're going to kill all hope that you could come to a Western country where there are some democratic safety measures for refugees. It's a new level of cruelty, a new level of inhumanity, and a new breach of democracy for secrecy and silence.
If I do something illegal, if I break the law, then I would expect to be charged, to be brought before the courts, to have my day in court, and if found guilty, to be given a sentence with a definable end. These people are not charged. They've broken no law. They cannot be charged, neither in national law nor in international law. They are in detention not because of any fair process of the courts. They're there because of the decree of the Minister of Immigration.
The facts are that they're in conflict, they're at war. So many people are dying of starvation. People are dying because of conflict. If there's a place of peace and harmony where there's freedom of speech here, people are able to not only speak their mind, but to be living happily with each other.
Jesus was a refugee. Today we say yes to refugees.
I believe that the government is immoral in the way they're treating the refugees, and I'm ashamed when I look at my Christian faith that those in power profess the same faith.
I think the debate about refugees at the moment is very political and not as humane, and I think we need to be bringing the humanity into the debate. I think it's really important that we're here today doing this rally because there are so many people that don't know the facts about asylum seekers and refugees, and there are so many myths going around, and I think it's important that everyone here is sharing with their friends and family and getting the word out about the facts of refugees, that they are not illegal, and that we should be a compassionate Australia because that's the Australia I want to be a part of. So
it's supposed to be representative democracy. We want someone to represent our views on the refugee issue. None of the established parties is doing this.
Our refusal to cooperate with the investigation into the murder of Reza Barat makes us an accomplice to murder, in my view. I just think we are being extremely unjustifiably cruel and criminal.
I'm told that the United Nations Commission has found Australia to be guilty of 150 breaches of human rights in its arbitrary detention regime. No wonder our government is so anxious to deny independent observers access to the Nauru and Manus Island detention centres. The Refugee Council of Australia puts it starkly. For asylum seekers already traumatised by the persecution or torture they have suffered, and the dangerous journey to find safety and protection, long-term indefinite detention in a harsh remote facility creates a highly toxic environment.
We started sailing towards Australia, and the second night we had a big storm. I remember everyone praying to God, some people regretting waters coming in. After a few nights, the next day we arrived in Australian waters and the Navy caught up with us. They told us you're not welcome to Australia. All of a sudden, nowhere, I just saw this black smoke rise, and my dad just picked me up, put me on his shoulders because I couldn't breathe. And everyone was forced to jump out of the boat. After several hours with us in the water, the Navy picked us up. But it was too late. One elderly woman and one young woman with child died. I knew them very close. They were staying in the same house, but we were staying in Indonesia. After the Navy took us to Christmas Island, we were in Christmas Island for 2 months. After that, they tricked us into going to Nauru Detention Centre by telling us, once you go there, you can contact your families back in Afghanistan. But once we got to Nauru, they did not provide us with any phones to contact our families. After 3 long years in detention, we got accepted to come to Australia as refugees on a temporary visa. We had to be on a temporary visa for 3 years. After that 3 years, they gave us permanent residency visas. After a year, in 2009, we got our citizenship in Australia.
Why would we do this to people who are simply fleeing persecution and war? Persecution and war, I might add, that we've actually been involved in their countries. It is the only decent thing to do to welcome those people into a safe environment and a safe asylum, as Australia has always been.
In Manus Island, one side faces the sea, and there's a walkway on the seafront, behind the wire of course, where the detainees have to walk in order to get to their meals, to eat meals 3 times a day. All this raw sewage from the camp passes through a rivulet under that walkway directly into the sea. And when there's a high tide or there's a storm, it covers the walkway, which they then have to walk through to eat. In the only footwear that they're provided, rubber thongs. These appear to be small things, but there are thousands and thousands of stories like that in centres controlled by our country, paid for by our tax dollars. And why do we do this? For what is this? Does it make us wealthier? That we spend billions of dollars now, keeping a tiny number of people out.
living in tents in 40-degree temperatures, children locked up indefinitely. We think it's just outrageous.
It's really Australia's duty as a well-developed country to do something more to help refugees.
I don't think that most of Australians have realised that how far along the spectrum of cruel and inhuman we've become.
Currently, we are taking about 13,500 people a year as refugees under this coalition government. Under the previous Labor government, we were taking 20,000 refugees. More than that go across a border in Italy or a border just about anywhere else in the world, including the American borders, every day. We are a laughing stock in the rest of the world, saying we can't take any more people. We need to have some perspective about this issue. We are going to see more and more refugees wanting to seek asylum in Australia for other reasons, and they would be climate change reasons. We are surrounded by people living on Pacific islands and atolls that are gradually sinking or becoming overrun by the sea. Are we going to turn around to these people and say, oh no, sorry, you can't come and seek refuge in Australia? We'll have you here on unskilled visas to come and pick our fruit and our vegetables, but we won't let you flee here if you've got no country to live in anymore.
And so we must protest. We must fight. We have the major parties against us. We have most of the press against us. If we believe the polls, we have most of the community against us. But I've said this before, and I think it's absolutely true. We may be a minority, but we are a stubborn minority that for decades now has resisted the arguments of the major parties and the press, and we are still here. And we are a passionate minority that is more than capable of building this into a powerful mass movement, and that now is our task. To raise our voices, to rail against these injustices.
To